Hello, this is Bug News, and today we're going to talk about Love and Marriage DC, in particular, the cast member uh, Jamie Towler, and his storyline to some degree, and also his wife Arena, just a little part of their storyline. But if you recall, uh, Jamie Towler, um, part of his storyline was that he had a rough childhood. Um, and usually when people say they had a rough childhood, in my opinion, there's humble beginnings and struggle. Maybe some meals missed. I don't know. Uh, Maybe going through uh, school. He might have been on free lunch or reduced lunch. For those of you may know or may not know what that means, but this may not be the case. Maybe that was just a storyline in this case. The only part that has a little validity to it in the storyline is that um, he, was probably in a single family household raised by his father for whatever reason, But we do know, as he stated, that I think he moved to Fort Washington, Maryland, out of the city during the period of the Great Migration, at the age of, I think, 8 or 9. So, maybe 1980, I don't know, maybe 19 in the 70s or something. And the Great Migration in the DC area is like a joke, but it is true. So what happened? Let's explain the Great Migration. Great Migration is okay. So as the African American community in the DC metro area, DMV, which is called today DC, Maryland, Virginia, they started to move out of the city because they became more and more middle class. Some of them started to move out of the city. Let's just say certain age groups, right? So let's say it started off into the 60s because of the riots, and then so when they was moving out, they was moving on the edges. They was moving far out. So far out, actually far out now is totally different, but far out, they weren't moving. He was moving on the edges, what some people might call a buffer zone. So, if you're not familiar with the Washington D.C. area, on certain parts you can literally like walk across the street, and you're in D.C. Walk across the street in Maryland, and this goes from has some areas in Prince George's County and also in Montgomery County, and you have to walk across the bridge, and of course in Virginia. Um, so so you can walk across the street. So let's just say those were the edges. Now where Jamie family moved to, that was considered far out for Washington during the Great Migration. So the Great Migration, as I said, you had black families, and particularly focused on moving out of the city. And one of the larger areas that they did, they moved to all the areas, but largely they moved to Prince George's County. Now, to move out to Fort Washington, that would, and during this time, let's say midstream, when people were migrating out, get to go down to Fort Washington, that was like, oh, you down in Fort Washington? That's like quasi kind of, well, not quasi, well, kind of like Woodmore today in this area, when they first built Woodmore. And then if you lived in Tantalion, which was down in Fort Washington, that was even more exclusive. But so I mean, the storyline, he was just expressing that he had a hard life. I don't think he had a hard life. He had a probably very strong middle class life. To even be living in Fort Washington. He also lived in Fort Washington. From my understanding, he attended Friendly High School. And while at Friendly High School, he took part in various activities. He played sports. I think he also was in various clubs. I mean, that don't sound like, the thug life to me, but, and these clubs were, well, let's not say that. because some other people were in various clubs when they was in high school. But um, he was, I think he was in the AV club and things like that. Um, and the environment there, I mean, it was pretty, traditional suburban community. I mean, all of the suburbs now are like urban suburbs, and I'm not talking about types of people. It's just it's a lot of congestion in the suburbs. So actually, when he was there, you would come out the city, probably either off 295 or straight down 210 Indian Head Highway. You ride down, and at some point, it just was thin out as far as probably the population when he was there. Like I said, the times he was there, and as he was growing up, probably up until mid 90s, then it started kind of like packing and build. People started to build. But so he probably was a good 20 minutes he probably was 15 minutes from Southeast, hit the line, maybe 10. But to get up to what he was saying when he went to Northwest, he was a good maybe 20 minutes, maybe 25, depending on the way you would go. So you're talking about two different areas, and not to say all Northwest was struggling. Some parts were, some parts wasn't. One major impact on that time was that I think around the 90s they built the Green Line, so that hit Northwest pretty hard and kind of changed the dynamic. Well, that particular Northwest was he's talking about, and changed the dynamics when they built the subway on U Street and the way they handled that. But anyway, that's not related to this topic. So, I mean, you would think that someone who was struggling, they wouldn't have a car when they was driving to high school and they got their license. Allegedly, Jamie had a car, driving to high school, didn't have a job. Who was paying insurance? I mean, that's the life. I mean, especially you're in high school, you taking part in athletics, and you got a car. So not he's said he was running the streets. Now, was he running the streets or he was just being out in the streets? We don't know. I mean, that's relative to what it is. But we only can speculate that his need to run the street may not have been as strong as someone else's whose needs may have been to run the street, where they had to run the streets to survive, to eat, to put clothes on themselves and have shelter. His need may have been different for clout, and he might have been even deeply involved in the clout. He just might have been out there, hanging out, driving his car, going to the go-go. Damn, he had money to go to the go-go because go-go wasn't free. Hanging, socializing, coming back to Fort Washington, nice, quiet. People nice. Hey, Jamie, how was the go-go? Oh, okay. Wow, that's nice. So, whereas others, they had to, walk, take the bus, hang outside. Can you make me a tape? He probably had PA tapes, playing in his car, where others didn't have those advantages. But but this is just speculation. We don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know Jamie. I'm just basing this on speculation and what people, let's just say the streets are saying. He did have a car when he was 16. He did grow up in Fort Washington. He did go to Friendly High School. And in the 80s, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, if you said those terms, hey, oh, okay, that dude down there, he doing all right down there. You can ask anyone from the D.C. metro area or DMV or Maryland or Prince George's County during that time period. If you say you lived in Fort Washington, what comes to mind? What type of lifestyle comes to mind? Okay, and not to say everyone, even if they were struggling, they had bills, still in the middle class lifestyle. Unfortunately, we have to say middle class, but still in that mind frame. But then add on to that someone who has a car, allegedly at 16, So 16, 17, well, 2 years, somebody paying that car insurance. Hell, the car might have been brand new. Usually some kids might get a car and just got liability. But if you also have collision and liability, and then in addition to that, he was outside the beltway. So if you also know the area, you're inside the beltway and you're outside the beltway. That's a whole, as far as car insurance. So we give him a little break on there. He might have had a good deal because he was outside the beltway on car insurance. But I haven't verified any of this information with Jamie, to say that he did have these things. Like I said, these just come from secondhand sources. But well, what do you think? I mean, could you still have a hard life growing up in a very upper middle class environment, where people are maybe supportive and looking out for you, and in the same mind frame and things like that. But and if we move on to Raina, she thinks during the story she stated that she went to school in D.C. I wouldn't have said that because I thought that was illegal, but she lived in Maryland. Now I don't know exactly where she lived in Maryland, but she said that she lived in Maryland. And then if she did go to school in D.C., you did have some people who were doing that. They were going to school in D.C., but they were taking advantage of the programs that the D.C. public schools offered. Although D.C. public schools wasn't supposed to have, supposed to be, not that good schools, but they had certain programs in their better schools that would benefit you. And I might be wrong, but I think she said she went to Wilson. So if she went to Wilson, she was uptown at one of the better schools. How did all that happen? I don't know. This is a different time. We're not trying to get nobody in trouble. Because today, like, you can go to any school, public school you want to, but usually you have to pay a fee. So in this area, let's say if I want to go to a Montgomery County school, it's $17,000 a year. That's the fee. If I live in Montgomery County, I want to go to Prince George County School, it's about $15,000. So it's the same thing for Fairfax. You want to go to Fairfax County School, which is in Virginia, you're going to pay that fee. Now you can do it illegal. You get caught now. They're trying to bust people out for doing these things. And the only reason that people do these things is, education can change your lifestyle, can change your life in the future, and that's from any background. So that's why people do that. But do you think these two had a rough life growing up, or is it just a storyline? Please comment, like, share, and hit that notification, and also subscribe. This is Bug News. Thank you very much.